so we can get things moving. So 7:03, meeting started. We will take new members as they come on board, but I'll do a roll call as I see it right now. And when I say your name, please answer aye or present. Lisa Hewitt-Dick.
Present.
Sean Keneally.
Present.
Martin St. John.
Present.
Mike Sardina.
Present.
Derek Goodwin.
Present.
And George Baumgarten. So awesome. We have a quorum of, I think I'm counting 6. That's awesome. Thank you all for being here. Just a few minutes ago, I sent out the minutes of the previous meeting. I'm going to bring them up on screen and talk to them just a moment. Let me share my screen. Actually go there. Yeah. I'm going to try. Can you guys see the minutes that I'm showing right now?
Yes.
So I sent these out a few minutes ago. I apologize because they're a bit of a piece. Susan did a great job of capturing all the discussion. I was doing a little editing for readability. And so they, you know, I think what's good about the minutes, among many other things, also the fact that Susan had them back by the end of that meeting. She was done with them. But they really captured the conversation we had from Mike Lane and Adam Donovan, which was awesome, and some others. So I think they're going to be good for reference purposes. Anyway, I think if you guys are up for it, I would entertain a motion to accept the minutes.
I would make a motion to accept.
Second.
Now, is there discussion or concern because you haven't had enough time or otherwise to accept the minutes? I'm just sort of going to page through just to give a flavor for them. So we had a lot of discussion about the state of the fishing industry and also their feelings about the infrastructure that we're proposing, which do play into our discussion for later tonight, later in the meeting about, you know, what position, if any, do we choose to take on these things. We had the update on Cohasset Wharf, and Susan did a nice job of capturing those slides. And then some takeaways from our site visits, talk about the survey launch, and then a little bit more on the dock, and that was it. Any questions or comments?
George, I was able to read them through before the meeting, and I think they're pretty accurate representation of the meetings.
Thank you. Thank you, Lisa.
Same here.
Then hearing no further discussion, all in favor of accepting, please, I guess, raise your hand visually if to accept. It looks like it's unanimous. Make sure I got that. Minutes are accepted. Thank you very much. Just going to change my view so I can see everybody well. Great. Next topic of discussion is the rec survey, and I'm going to change and see if we can see that. Can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
So, oh, hi, Susan. We're just talking about the rec survey. Thanks for joining, Susan.
Yep. Sorry. Sorry, I just got sucked into State of the Harbor invitations, which
No worries.
setting.
So I will I'll give a brief update and then we'll go through it. In short, so I just did this presentation last night at 7 o'clock. We had 236 responses as of 7 o'clock yesterday. We have 280 as of today. And they're coming in, I get notifications, they come in about once every 20 minutes.
It's great.
It's pretty remarkable, a pretty remarkable response, and I don't think we're done yet. I think a big kudos to Martin St. John, among others. Martin, whatever you did sending out to the yacht club, they have just, I think we've gotten 100 responses from the yacht club in the past 2 days from yacht club.
Took a little while to wake them up, but once I did, that's a as you can imagine, a passionate group of folks. So
Well-
they're excited about the harbor and what might be happening in the future.
That's awesome. And then Lisa, CMI was early on in this, running a close second behind the yacht club in terms. I mean, actually,
I'll get you.
I'll come back to it. But this is what we were seeing.
Never.
If you can see the screen, so this is, people can be members of multiple groups, but the yacht club is just, this is as of last night, and we probably have 30 or 40 more responses from them alone today. And then we don't have anybody sending stuff out from the marina, but not surprisingly, we capture them other ways. So CMI sent out an email. Sean, thank you. You were right up there, first one out. And we have at least 66 coming in from the sailing club as of yesterday. And then Susan, 30 in from CSCR, and I think Jack was is or was going to put it in one of your newsletters coming up.
But we can announce it at the State of the Harbor too.
Yep. No complaints. I mean, we're getting a great representation from all the groups. And then secondly, the Wilcott Commons asked if we could have paper copies. So I said, sure. I have 15 paper surveys to input from the folks who go to Wilcott Commons that they gave me. So that's also still to come. And then Derek, I think I talked with Ted, and we're going to get into the upcoming Cohasset Rec calendar, and we're also getting into the Cohasset Elder Affairs letter, which I can't remember what that's called, but both of those are still coming. We're going to keep the survey open, for at least planning to keep it open for another 6 or 7 weeks. So I think this is going to be one of the most popular surveys that I think has been run in Cohasset in a while. Just my opinion.
I'd like to call Paul Trendowitz and ask if, they send out materials all the time to the Harbor Marina to see if he put out a little.
That would be great. I mean, if you're able to, I see we've already, captured 41 members of that group through the various means.
Yeah.
Also, this was in Chris Senior's email.
Mhm.
So
How do we get more, how do we get more people in the community, none of the above, to respond? Because that's really where we need to get feedback, because all these others have already got involvement in the harbor in one way or the other. So it's trying to solicit input from people who don't yet have access or something going on in the harbor.
Good question. So one way we did that is we sent it. It was included for those of you who subscribed to the Chris Senior weekly update. It was in last week's update, and I definitely saw some responses come in immediately after that was released. Susan, I don't know if you've had a chance to connect with the Cohasset school system.
I haven't yet.
That would be another way to go after the none of the above. And Mike, I think, again, getting it into the senior newsletter and the rec
Direct fare.
committee catalog is those are going to hit those none of the aboves. We're also planning to attend the Cohasset Town Rec Fair. Actually, I want to talk about that. I'm planning to attend. Would love another couple of people who are interested to sit there for an hour. Lisa, that would be great. If anybody hasn't been to it, Derek, I know you're thick with that, but that's a really fun event.
Lots and lots of people.
And particularly since I think they hand out town stickers. You can sign up for town stickers right there. Very popular.
Not to mention some great farmers market produce there too.
That's
Hot
happening this
sauces.
year.
Oh, great.
Yeah, they'll have the farmers market there too. There'll be a food truck outside, a coffee truck outside. It's worth popping in, especially if the weather's nice.
That's great to hear. So I guess, Mike, I think not that we've got it covered, but I think we have those mechanisms and we're keeping this open. And then the Wilcott Commons stuff, I haven't entered it yet, but I think there's probably I've seen a number of none of the aboves in the hard copy responses to that.
But Mike, if you can help us reach out to people, that would be great, because this, yeah, we definitely don't want to have just the clubs represented, because that's rather biased.
Yeah, it was just to try and get the word out, but that we're already beyond that. I mean, so I think we've, by putting things out in the as many distribution means as we can. Just to sort of hit the highlights of this, as of last night, this was the representation of the survey, so about 3-to-1 of Cohasset residents to non-residents. Actually, as of today, I've seen that pick up where it's like 80% residents, 20% non. I would say not surprisingly, we have, this is the representation of age groups. So very few basically very few under 34 years old. And then we have, 11% in the 35 to 44, 25% in the 45 to 54, 24% in the 55 to 64, and then 34% over 65. So pretty nice representation. It is what it is. Again, the point on this wasn't really to capture ages. We do have, and I'm not doing it tonight, we have the ability to filter the results by any age group, any group that, by answers from the yacht club or answers from CMI or answers from people associated with CSC. We can filter those answers if we want, if there's, for some reason, some big difference between the wants of, for instance, people over 55 versus the wants of people under 55. We can do that if we want. But right now we're keeping the survey open for a while, and I actually want to share this with this group because I'm not a statistical analyst. I'm not somebody who spots trends for a living. And if there are some of you on this who do spot trends in data for a living, or know a data analyst we could talk with to say, hey, I think this says this. I mean,
Laura Humphrey is the statistics teacher at the school, and that might be a nice project for her to do with her students. That would be real world based.
I love that. Is she associated with CSCR?
She has been. She ran the Eelgrass project before I started.
That's a cool thing.
Very.
Like that. Anyway, ideas like this or insights, please. I did send this out last night, but so, which of the activities, I haven't really gone through this, but people, wanted to say what they wanted to say. And that's why we allowed the other. This is pretty much the easiest way to look at it at the moment. Again, these other things, not to study it today, but if you have looked at it or have insights, otherwise, I sent this an email yesterday. Susan, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, when we talked about the ages, one of the things when you're looking at long-term planning, you can think about those ages as if they were a population pyramid, and imagine that in 20 years, everybody who is currently less than 20 is going to be over 20.
Yeah.
And everybody who is less than 34 is going to be less than 54. So, and we really should be thinking that way, because our job is really to plan for the long-term future, not just the next 3 to 5 years, because that's, 3 to 5 years, that's just a process. That's what everybody else is doing. And the things that we can bring to the discussion, because we do not have the bias of somebody that has to report into somebody at 3 to 5 years, is that we can provide that long-term thinking. So I think trying to imagine for every participant in this survey that their answers might be different in 20 years, and to plan harbor access for the population of the future, not of the present.
Thank you. Insights appreciated. Because I don't know this stuff, but I'm happy to see we have a lot of data to work with. We've touched on this before. We're getting good representation from these groups, and we'll see. This was helpful, and there was questions about how does boating relate to your recreation. So, we see we've got over a third of the respondents keep a boat at a dock. A quarter of the respondents have a mooring, and so on and so forth. sort of the good news is we have a lot of public accessible institutions, whether it's CSC, CMI, CSCR, that are giving people a lot of access to the harbor. And those are, very scalable.
But
very
we should
very-
also look at this with caution, because as we've said, we've only gotten our survey out through certain means. We haven't gotten it out to the whole means. So
It's just preliminary.
to analyze the data and suggest that we have answers at this point, I don't think is, I mean, I think that it's good to know that our system is working, that we can analyze the data, but I don't think that we want it on public record that this is the data at this point, because that's just jumping the gun.
I mean, it's on public record because we're in a public meeting. This is preliminary results, Susan, for sure.
Yeah, well, it needs
The
to be
idea is to
that it's
get,
preliminary.
the idea is to generate thoughts on how we're going to interpret the data when we do close the survey. And so I'm looking not just to you, Susan, or you, Lisa, but the wisdom of the group. As you think about this, or if you see something that we've missed or don't see as an insight that is actually, staring out at us.
And it's kind of fun to see it at this point anyway. I mean, it's preliminary. It's just, we're just out of the box. It'll be a while before we finish, but it's fun to see the people responding.
Yeah, it's pretty, I'd say it's indicative. It's not decisive.
But it's fun, but it's definitely not official. So we just need to make sure that we're not.
Susan, we're there. We're going to close the survey, as we discussed in our last meeting, in early May, and with the idea of producing a report, sharing it with the town, influencing, the idea is to help us with our decisions, and those are already upon us. So I think it's helpful even to see this on a preliminary basis, because we're having to say things now. So here's more, and again, you can look at these. I wanted to share a little bit more on this. So one of the key things we asked for was verbatims, for basically what didn't we ask that you want to say to us. And the way to read this is, as of yesterday, we had 92 out of the 236 responses wrote something in about what else do you believe would improve recreation at Cohasset Harbor. I went through and looked at them, and what these numbers above they represent the number of mentions of the word oyster, or the word access, or the word launch, or ramp, or kayak, or mooring, etc. So it's not my impression. You can see, here's one that mentioned oyster, and here's one that mentioned a whole bunch of stuff. And I just went through and eyeballed the answers to identify, and saw that there were some trends worth looking at. For instance, like gas and fuel, they meant the same thing, but I had to capture them in separate columns. Clean water came up a bit. Kayak and access were often mentioned in the same breath. So I've actually included all the answers. Again, not to go through them in detail, but I think, again, for this group, these are in your email as of yesterday around 7:30 in the evening. And I would encourage you to take a look at this PDF that we sent. So here's everything here's everything verbatim that people shared with us. And so on and so forth.
Quite a bit of concern about the stuff with Situate.
Absolutely. Yeah, if you count that, I didn't count the number of exclamation marks, but yes. Yeah, and there's probably stuff in here that, people said and I didn't capture as a point. But yeah, I think, there's lots of insight into here of things that maybe they're one-offs, or, maybe they're other stuff. The other thing that I was encouraged by is, I didn't list them, but 79 people asked to be put on our mailing list for a town, to be notified of upcoming meetings. I didn't do this for today, but it is something that we will do on an ongoing basis.
Great.
And that's where we stand. I guess I'm gonna stop sharing for the moment and ask, what are your impressions, first impressions or other impressions, or other insights that for people we haven't heard from.
I'm just trying to figure out what other channels we can use to get the numbers up. You know what I mean? Like, where else in town? You know, what haven't we thought of? You know, I'm thinking, I don't know how it would be done. Like I
Yeah.
distributed to the, I distributed to the yacht club. There was one distributed to the sailing club, CMI, Coastal Research Center. They're all on mailing lists, I'm at least, the yacht club, and I'm assuming the sailing, it's easy to hit everybody up.
I'll throw out some that we haven't hit yet, but we have on our list. So Susan, I guess I'd ask, do you have the ability to talk to Bill at the Cohasset schools and see if he's willing?
Bill, you mean Brian?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Brian Scott? Yeah.
yeah. So that will be a good one. Susan's gonna follow up on that. I mentioned CEF, who has a very broad mailing list. I haven't connected with them, and I'm not quite sure how to connect them. Anybody know how to connect with CEF specifically, or know somebody there?
I could undertake that and see if I can find somebody. I think I know some families that might be involved.
I mean, they're public. I could go look online, but I've sort of aged out of it, so I don't know anybody right now.
Have you heard of that? I'm on it. I don't really go on. I mean, I'm on it, but I don't cruise it. It's more than one town, which that could be an issue. Have you ever heard of the Next? It's called Nextdoor.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know how that could be done logistically, but Cohasset Harbor, maybe, I don't know how, I'm not a tech guy, but it's just another. Montana's smiling, maybe she knows. I don't know. It sounds, she has an evil grin over there, like she knows something we don't. I don't know, but
I'm smiling 'cause you don't have to be a tech guy. It's okay.
yeah,
What's
I
up,
know.
Montana?
No, I mean, I don't think you need to have, I think you can have an account, but you can just post it like on Facebook, and then you're gonna get a surge of respondents and probably people from a lot of other towns, but you have that question for non-residents. But you can just post it and then people will respond to it.
So,
Well, especially Cohasset, 143 group on Facebook, because that's
Yeah, I was just gonna
a
say
little more
that, yeah.
Cohasset specific.
That would
well,
be
let me pause on that a moment. We have not gone to social media because we had a choice in putting out this survey to lock it down to one response per person, which would require you to have a Google account, or not. We've elected to not lock it down. So there's a risk, which we already have, of a spammer getting hold of this and killing us. And putting it out on Cohasset 143 or any website other than the town website, I think is too risky the way we've structured the survey. We left it open so that the older populations of Cohasset could use it without a Google account. I think, Derek, you asked that question a few weeks ago. So I'm hesitant, or actually saying, to me, it's not a good idea for us to put this on Facebook or Cohasset 143 for that reason.
I mean,
a way you would send something in the post office used to put on request. I don't know who that is. That's not my,
Somebody's there's a little bit of noise in the background. I don't
not
know.
for
if
me. I don't know
Susan-
who's you.
Somebody's yoo-hooing here.
There is some that used to be, I don't know if it's any longer something that the Cohasset post office will do, but they used to put something in the mail for people if it just could go to everybody. It didn't, if it wasn't addressed to a certain place. So some of the nonprofits used to send things out and it would be just some sort of solicitation. And I wonder if there'd be any way to, put a card in with the code on it, and just have the postal workers just put it in every single mailbox. I don't know if they still do that, but I know they did it like 10 years ago, especially during the holidays, if they were asking, it'd be something we could ask about. And that
Yeah.
would be, it's expensive to direct mail. So we don't want to get into stamps. We it's very expensive to direct.
Really, yeah, we don't have any budget.
And it's probably not
Well-
worth it, but if it's something that we could impact everybody with the code on it, QR code, and just have it be sitting on everyone's kitchen counter, that would be, I think, an incentivizer.
Well, not that it's the same, but Derek, does the Cohasset rec calendar go out to every Cohasset address?
Yeah, it does.
Not everybody reads it, but everybody gets it.
No, it does. And you know, I was going to say that, and even though we're having the social media discussion and concerns about spamming, if you look at the initial responses, and as you observed, we have a, you know, kind of a shortage of responses for people under 34 or 34 and under, and I don't know, maybe it'll change with the recreation brochure, but I feel like that market, that target market in particular, is really only paying attention to social media these days, unfortunately.
Well, I mean, I agree, but I mean, I just think that the risk is really high going that route.
Well, I
Because-
also agree with that, yeah.
and I've seen Cohasset 143. There's some viciousness that happens on that site that I wouldn't want to be exposed to, among other things.
Well,
Agreed.
not that under 34 is really on Facebook, more on
Yeah.
Instagram and
Yeah, yeah, if we could agree, thank you. Instagram would be the place. But yeah, I think, and then Cohasset Vista, which I can't remember if I get, but I don't know what their mailing list is. But that's not going to the younger set. So I think, you know, if we were in a position to potentially put a flyer in the schools, I have no idea how possible that is. That could be a winner. We just haven't approached the schools.
the schools, and perhaps even some of the local businesses that might be willing.
Yeah,
I know there's a few that have billboards, and maybe if we have a flyer with a QR code, that they would put it up and maybe get a few more responses out of that way.
and that would be, to me, totally appropriate and safe if we could put survey flyers.
Yeah, there's
up.
also a board at the library.
Right, haven't gone that route. I did put one up at the Cohasset Elder Affairs at 60 Elm Street. But it's a QR code and it's a Cohasset Elder Affairs. So it's funny, I had a discussion with Liza Salerno at Wilcott Commons today, who had lots of QR codes. She said, I know our market, and the QR code's fun, George. But not what our population's going to use to do this survey. In so many, they still had it up there, but yeah. Oh, so I like the idea of the library and the library and local businesses.
So we should, since you're already making some paper copies for the Wilcott Commons, we should make those for Liza Salerno's people who said that they're not going to do QR codes.
Well, I already did.
Okay.
Yeah, she's doing great on getting the paper copy. She's just accumulating them as people fill them out. We actually have a great full card table. This occupies a good position at Wilcott Commons. Montana, I can't remember if you printed out some new flyers with the updated QR code that maybe I need to pick up.
Yes, they are sitting on my desk. They still should be there. I'm working from home this week because I'm carless, but
Okay.
they should still be there for you.
Okay.
So when was the QR code updated? So what one should we throw away?
I will send out, I mean, Montana has updated flyers. Maybe Montana, could you send out the flyer to this group at your convenience?
So did we put the wrong QR code in our mailing recently?
It wasn't
Did Mon-
exactly the wrong one. Basically the website that I used, it was like a 14-day trial.
Oh,
So
yeah.
it became inactive, like I think on the second day that we posted it, but I switched it pretty quickly. So like the stroll, George and someone else got the stroll with the correct one. Everyone else has the correct URL, but the flyers itself, like the printed ones, the colorful ones, don't have the right one, but
I only put them up.
non-color print ones.
I put them up in two places. Susan Jack has the correct QR code. Martin had the correct QR code. The update on that is anybody who sent an email, pretty much nobody's going to use the QR code. They're just going to click the link. So it's almost superfluous in an email. It sort of looks official, but nobody will use it, or very few people will. It's only in printed material like the catalogs and flyers where the QR code comes into play. So I think those are some good suggestions. I will tell you, I'm thrilled with the responses already. I think this is a very high turnout given the given how long it's been out and what we're seeing so far, and the fact that we have not by any means exhausted our distribution possibilities yet. So what I have is, Lisa, you're going to explore CEF. Susan, you're going to explore with Brian Scott, something to the Cohasset Public Schools. Next door, I've said no because it's social media.
What
I
about
will look-
Cohasset Anchor? Does that count as social media? That's like supposedly our town newspaper these days.
It is, but it's to me, as great as it is, yes, I would be worried that anybody in the world can find it.
I miss the
Also, I
Mariner.
mean, well, we are on the Cohasset Town website, and we have the QR code on the Cohasset Harbor page, so that's a great reference point to send people to. I feel that's safe. Who wants to visit the Cohasset Town website? But if we direct people there, it's there on the Cohasset Harbor page. Susan, can you also, is Brian Scott the right one to talk to about the possibility of putting a flyer on the wall?
Yeah.
So can you take that?
Yeah.
Okay. And Montana,
the other
you're gonna-
place?
Yep.
Sorry. The other place that might be a good place where you'd have to put a flyer up. But it is sort of ground central and it's on the harbor for a lot of folks that stop in and have a drink there. They have events there, is the American Legion. That is, I mean, anybody who's it's a Cohasset institution, people go in there, nights, weekends, and it's a whole, it's a it used to be a long time ago, kind of like a men's club kind of place. And now all of a sudden, over the last few years, it's evolved into this open kind of place that people go and hang out at. And it's on the harbor. And they certainly own, a nice piece of property on the harbor. So there might be a spot to put flyer in there.
Let me ask Martin, as somebody who does not frequent that, would you be willing to give that one a try yourself?
I could try that one as well.
And Montana, if you send the flyers out, they only need, if you have a black and white printer, you can just print the flyer. It's very simple.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
And I can reach out to the veterans coffees that Wolfie got going with Mahoney.
What's that, Susan? What group?
Veterans coffees, one Friday every month. There's one in Hull, there's one in Cohasset, so I can see if Wolfie can get that crew.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, any other discussion about the survey? We'll have more on it. We'll have to figure out what to do with the data. My thought is we will want to report to the select board, probably among other things, when we have this data. That was really the reason for keeping the survey open till early May, closing it down. Then we're going to have our harbor committee meeting in May. That's when our next scheduled meeting is. And we would follow that with a report out as we determine. But I think there's some interesting insights here.
George, how do you want to handle the rec fair? I mean, what's the drill? Are we going to be having copies of code, and
we asked for a table.
Yeah.
What I haven't solved. Oh, that's this coming Sunday.
yeah.
Well, all I'm thinking is I want to print out like a sheet, an 8x11 sheet, cut into 4 pieces
Right.
with the QR code.
That's what I'm asking. Right.
And then let people, and we'll have it there and people can shoot it on their iPhones right there. I'll probably bring my laptop, but I really think we want people filling it out on their own.
I do too.
on
But it
their
would be nice, it would be nice to have the accessibility of here's a laptop, you can just fill it in right here.
You can, so I think, or I'll have a tablet, I have a
I
iPad.
could
any
bring a
of those
tablet
things
if
go.
need be.
So we'll have that. Anybody else up for coming? Lisa, I've heard you, I'll coordinate with you.
Yep.
Anybody else interested in sitting at a table for an hour at the rec fair? Talking Cohasset Harbor rec surveys?
I've got other stuff to hawk, sorry.
Yeah, I got a lot coming down with the yacht club opening up soon. I got meetings beyond meetings.
All right,
Is
Well,
that,
Lisa-
is that this Sunday? I'm sorry.
it is the 25th.
Oh,
24th.
24th. It's this Sunday, yes.
I would, but I actually might have to be at a memorial service that day.
We'll figure it
Unfortunately,
out.
If your plans change, Derek, we'd be happy to have you.
I will. I'll let you know.
I would also suggest that you guys have like maybe 10 paper copies of the survey. AEC is also having their survey and they're doing like the QR code and like a few paper copies. So I would just suggest that as like another like substitute for people because people are going to be moving really fast and like
Mm.
they could like they could scan it, they could do it on the laptop, but just as like one extra just in case kind of thing.
Yeah.
I agree. I would suggest actually even more if it's a half-page flyer that just says what the survey is all about. People will just drop it in their bag and check it out later when they get home.
Easy to do. I have a version of the survey that we used at Wilco Commons.
Yep.
Great suggestion. Montana, I might prevail on, oh, you can't print, or can you print and I can pick up?
I can ask Cassandra to print it and it will be ready by like tomorrow if you want to pick it up.
Great, great.
Mhm.
Great suggestions, all things. Yeah, I'm excited about that. And it's a fun thing to attend. All I'll say is, in the meantime, Susan or Lisa, if you think we need to have a subcommittee meeting of our communications group to review the interim results in a few weeks, we could do that too. But
Sounds good.
those are options to do. Then why don't we move to the next topic? We are right on time. I think I sent it out in an email, but I'm going to try and find it. Anyway, the next topics are to see. Let me bring up the rather than blab about it, I'll just share my screen. If you can see that. This is the agenda. So basically I wanted to talk about if the Harbor Committee wants to take a position on certain things we've been talking about. The harbor moorings and oyster farm I put together, the commercial fishing improvements of Conveyor and Government Island Pier, the Parker Avenue dock extension. And the reason is somewhat in response to a discussion I had with Lori Gibbons a few weeks ago, that we're certainly discussing these things, but we don't have a position as a committee. What I've thought of, I think that is appropriate, and it's something to report back to the select board. My thought on the position as a committee is, if we are to stake a position, then, how is it benefit getting things done and basically in support of or informative to the select board? That's my thought on that. I'm going to try and pull up the email I sent on this. I forgot to have it handy, but I'll bring it up in 2 seconds. You just take a look.
Yeah. Hey, George, I think I gotta bounce. So, apologies. I hear people in my kitchen, which makes me a little it's a little unsettling, so I'm gonna, I'm gonna go. Yeah, I have family that showed up, but I'll follow up with you, tomorrow or
That's
before
terrific.
the weekend hits.
All right.
Thanks,
Thanks,
everyone.
Martin. Take
See
care.
ya. Bye now.
Bye.
See you, Mark.
Let me just stop sharing there and I will. Hold on. Gosh. And I'm going to start sharing here. So this was the email, so it was about about a week ago. What I've suggested for these, please give thought to 2 key focuses for our meeting. Identify the Harbor Committee's desired outcomes for the initiatives below, identifying action steps that we can take that positively influence those outcomes. And those would be around the harbor moorings and management considerations, like topics like, what do we think about the town getting a survey of the town boundaries within the harbor, or the safety services for our mooring holders and other people in the harbor, services for transient boats, mooring management, channel dredging, the breakwater climate resilience planning. Those are things that, are topics that we're talking about. But if somebody were to say, well, what does Harbor Committee think? You can infer it. Oyster Farm considerations, there's a lot of stuff to it, but what happens if there's a storm in it and all the stuff washes up on shore, or a lot of stuff? What about navigational markings? What about considerations for food safety? And then just going through the rest, commercial fishing improvements. What is our point of view? I mean, what I understand from Lori is the conveyor is, all set in terms of what the planning is for that. But the Government Island Pier expansion, based on what we heard from Mike Lane and Adam Donovan, what's our perspective on that? And then the Parker Avenue dock extension. This is one that is quite well informed by the survey. Expanded public access for temporary tie-ups, small boats, dinghy moorings. We really, the survey was able to go after answers on that. So we don't have to know that, but I think we can be informed by that. So talking about, again, looking at the agenda, Cohasset Harbor moorings and the oyster farm. What is your opinion? As I'm the chair, but I don't necessarily have any more knowledge or position on this than any of you. Does Harbor Committee, is it advantageous for us to have a position on this? And how do we form that? And Lisa, I see you with your hand up. I'm interested in your perspective.
I'm very concerned about taking positions about things that are in litigation, because I think that can be counterproductive to the positions of the town. I'm very interested in supporting the commercial fishing fleet and Lori and everybody else. I want to have positions on things that are meaningful, that our positions are impactful. I don't know if at this juncture, maybe 3 years ago, it may have had a different impact about what the Harbor Committee had, but presently, I don't know if the Harbor Committee having a particular, because I don't know how this group would come out on the oyster farm. A position that could be contrary to the town's position, I don't think that's helpful. And I don't think it's very productive, as opposed to prioritizing for our decision makers, the selectmen, things that we think are very important to be done now, like the conveyor belt, and like the finishing up, and getting a survey of the town boundaries. I think that's phenomenally important. but it doesn't go to the heart of any present litigation, even though it would be impactful to present litigation.
Mhm.
It isn't a position on a controversial issue. We just want to know where our town boundary is. I don't know if that,
No, and
Wait,
this
so
is why
how-
I'm asking. But hold on, Derek has his hand up. So Lisa, are you good?
yeah, good, thank you.
But-
And
Yeah.
I think Mike Dick is in the, is in the waiting.
Oh,
room.
he's,
Yep.
okay. Derek, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I was first of all going to second what Lisa was saying. I totally agree with that thought process on some of the stuff regarding the moorings and the oyster farm and you know, stuff that's more or less outside of our control anyway right now. One question I do have though, and forgive me, you know, I'm newer on this committee as well, but the two commercial fishermen vacancies within this committee, can anybody give me just some thought on that and what the meaning is there and what our plans are with that? Because I feel like that would also impact decisions like this pretty heavily.
Yes. I can share a little bit. We've previously had active fishermen on the committee, predating me, Lisa, I think you know. But working with Lori Gibbons, we hadn't identified a potential. First of all, the fishermen, they have to live in Cohasset and they
Right.
have to be willing to serve. Our sort of workaround on that has been that we have these two very articulate people, Adam Donovan and Mike Lane, who fish out of Cohasset but don't live here. So that's why we've invited them to be speakers. And I think, you know, as a committee, they're informing us, and we're generally not taking votes. So, and based on a willingness to hear them, I feel like we're, you know, getting good input from folks who represent the fishing area. What Lori did suggest, she has somebody that she wants to bring on to the that she thinks would be a good member of our committee. I'm not positive if they're a fisherman, but they would be potentially up for joining actually any time if they are, or if not, they would come on in June when some of the positions may open up here.
Yeah, I do as well, and I'm curious if it's the same person Lori and I are thinking about. And the only other thing is, you know, the second two bullets, and again, I know it's still premature to deep dive into the data from the survey, but you know, one thing you did notice when you were marking words and some of those other responses were access is a huge priority, and clearly water access, in my opinion, should be a huge priority as well as we evolve this.
Yeah, and that will, you know, I'm looking at the survey results so far, it's like, you know, we did leave it wide open, like list everything you want. And so, you know, we have a lot of near ties, you know, or things, some things are slightly more important than others, but access is the one that in the verbatims, you know, showed up more prevalently than other topics in the verbatims. And I think we suspected that. That's part of the whole point of the survey, is to find out how do people use the harbor and what are they missing? What would they like to see more of? So who else? So I heard from Lisa about saying, you know, little bit tricky for us to take a position on everything that I'm showing online here, particularly anything that's in litigation between Situate and Cohasset around the moorings and the oyster farm. But there may be things we might still advocate for that are not not a topic necessary of litigation. But who else on the committee would like to speak or has a point of view on whether we should take a position on, or have a position, not take one, but have a point of view on commercial fishing or the Parker Avenue dock extension? Susan, your hand is raised. You have the floor.
I'm just wondering how we might go about having that discussion, because you have a lot of different topics here. Some of them there's little facts that could be shared that would remove some of the things from consideration, I think. But what would be a good process for us for answering your question? Like
Yeah,
how
how
might
would we
we all
do it?
work together? Yeah, like, do we want to go through one by one?
Well, on the agenda, I have Cohasset Harbor moorings as a topic, followed by commercial fishing improvements, followed by, yeah, so I have them as one by ones. On the agenda. So I
So
just,
should we discuss them in that order then, that's on the agenda, not on this bulleted list?
sure, let's talk about I mean, just to Lisa and having heard from Derek, the first item on there was Cohasset Harbor moorings and the oyster farm, so they were sort of both together. Lisa's position was that it's tricky to have a position on these because they're in litigation, but if there's anything in, anything in, and I put these out as et ceteras, they're examples. If there's anything in here that we feel we either have a position or we want to actually take action to try and get the town to sponsor a survey and try and move that, we could.
So I would say that it's not our job just to rubber stamp stuff that's going on in the town. I think that we should not be afraid of controversy if there's things that could be cleared up by some people. And I mean, the people who are on this committee are people that really do know the harbor pretty well. So I don't think that, our opinion is less valuable than people who are select board people who have a lot of other things to keep their minds on. I mean, I think we really focus on harbor issues here and we're pretty knowledgeable about it. So
Yeah, no doubt.
I don't need to add extra controversy to anything, but I think that if we have information that should be shared, that's accurate and then could influence things, I don't think that we should, I don't think we should shy away from.
So let me throw
And
out.
that's only if, the committee comes to a unanimous opinion. It's not, and I don't, it's not, I don't think that we should be each of us firing off, because that doesn't really help. And we're not, and I also know that each of us has our own constituencies within our organizations that we represent. So, but within that, I can certainly tell you that there's a few things that I do know factually here. I know that the oyster farm related storm debris and cleanup is already addressed in the bylaws that apply to the oyster farmers. All of their gear has personally identifiable tags on it, as do the lobstermen here. So any fishing gear that washes up anywhere should be actually returnable to the actual fishermen, and they are supposed to be in charge of absorbing the costs of that situation.
And,
so that's
and
one thing.
Appreciate that. I didn't have the, I didn't read the detail of how the oyster farmers operate. So thank you for that. Do you know anything about the navigation markings that are marking the oyster farm? Do you know that, Susan?
Yeah, so the navigation markings that were out there at the end of last summer were 4 buoys per plot, I think, and they're just regular, like, lobster pot sized buoys.
Yeah.
So if you're navigating out there and not to get your propeller wrapped around a lobster pot, it's basically the same procedure. And I also do know that the oyster traps are only ever visible above the water at an extreme low minus tide, so one of our low moon tides, and otherwise they're underwater. And I can show people pictures of what that looks like if you want, because we were out there with students at the minus tide. Because that's one of the things that we keep track of, is we often walk the low tide line to show the outlines of the flats with a GPS tracker.
Awesome.
We make tracks of where the low tide line is, and we try to get out there at the very low, then the lowest low. So,
okay. Let me ask another question I threw out there, because I know this is part of the Cohasset concern of the select board is that, storm-related overflows from Cohasset wastewater could flow out of the harbor and potentially, interact with the oyster farms. But I think I've also heard that, given where they're located and that most houses in Situate waters they're not on any kind of town sewer, they're on septic systems. Do we have any idea how oysters process water that is potentially contaminated either from a overflow in Cohasset or from a, do you have factual knowledge about how oysters manage that?
I don't really want to speak on that officially because I'm not exactly
Okay.
sure, but I do know that in general, people say that oysters actually do filter water, and so they actually help clean up water. But what, and then the other thing I can offer on that is CSER for years has been studying the water currents as they flow down out of the Gulf River, out of the Cove, out of Briggs Harbor on the outgoing tides, and where the eddies are.
Yeah.
We also have a teacher from Situate this year, Ralph, who's been with us before, and he's interested in kicking the drifter team back into functionality and adding some maybe some tech to that. But I think that we could, CSER could say for the summer of 2024, we could take that on as a research project and say, we're specifically trying to answer the question about where does the current coming out of the Cove, which has the bubbler of wastewater treatment, where does that water flow? And then we have the technology to do that study ourselves. And we could, it's the same thing.
I would say, to Lisa's point, we're starting to get, into areas where the select board may or may not want that data shown. Go ahead, Lisa.
Can I call a point of order, Mr. Chairman? This is all incredibly interesting and helpful, but I thought that the question before the committee was, should we be taking positions as opposed to talking about what our position and what knowledge base we have on those items are?
Yeah.
So if we could kind of go back to deciding if we're going to take positions, I think that would be helpful.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you, Lisa. Maybe I'll go back to, even though we're doing these one at a time, are there ones where, like ones that we feel we could take a position or that we would want to take a position? It sounds like, I mean, to your point, Lisa, harbor moorings and management and oyster farm are definitely tied up in, litigation between Cohasset and Situate, and they
Just
would
to
be.
clarify, George, I don't believe that having a position that the town should have a survey of the town's boundaries within the harbor is controversial at all. I think
Okay.
that's something that is needed. What I don't want to talk about is, what is, we're against the town of Situate saying that those are their, I mean, that's the question that is
Yeah.
seeking a remedy in the courts. On the oyster farm, I mean, if we were to discuss.
You're cutting out.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, actually, I could hear her. So Susan, that might be you, but I'm not sure.
Anyway, I think I made my point. I
Lisa,
think.
I'm
Yeah.
sorry, can you repeat that? No, you didn't, because your connection was cutting out. So can you say it again, please?
Sure. What I said is on the harbor moorings and management, I do believe that the committee could take a position that the town needs an up-to-date third-party survey of the town boundaries.
Okay.
Prefer not to get into the questions that are pending before the court, which are about who owns what. We're asking for a third-party analysis. On the oyster farm, we could be doing, we could decide that we want to talk about the priority of having, making sure that there's debris and cleanup, but not tie. It should be done by whatever type of farming is done out there, but don't tie it necessarily to the oyster farm, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay. Okay. Well,
Lisa, I'm sorry, I still didn't know what you said, but it appears to be my internet connection, so I'm gonna see if it works better downstairs.
okay. Well, why don't, just for sake of, and see how this flows, why don't we make a motion about the harbor committee advocates that I'll make a motion I move that the Harbor Committee recommends that there be a survey of the harbor designating the town boundaries performed by a third party, and that be performed as soon as possible.
Second.
I have a question. Is that already ongoing by somebody else? I mean, I know we have so many different consultants engaged in the harbor at this point. Isn't that under somebody's purview already?
It's in discussion. Nobody's making it happen. I'm not saying that we will make it happen, but it gives us the ability to say we're strong advocates for making something happen. How do we make that happen? But I've been in discussions with Brian Joyce and with Lori Gibbons and others, and everybody's like waiting for somebody else to make it happen. That may be still true. I think we're in favor of making it happen.
Just one, I'm sorry, one more question. Oh, Mike's got his hand up. I don't want to interrupt.
Okay, we'll go Mike, thank you, and then you, Derek. Mike, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just wondering whether or not this survey is part of going to be part of a defined agreement at some point that the survey is going to have to be done. And I don't know why Cohasset would pay for it, since Situate is the one who's creating this issue. If we don't know that the survey is in the works or is part of the overall discussions between Situate and Cohasset, I'm not sure we should advocate for it. And I certainly don't advocate for paying for it. Can't imagine it's going to be inexpensive. That's my only point.
I think that's probably why it's not being, one of the reasons it's not being done yet is everybody's looking for somebody else to pay for it, is my opinion.
But to have a defined line done by somebody, and the fact that this committee that has been charged with looking at these issues, let's pretend that the mooring issue isn't even around. We really should know. We really should know where the border is under any circumstance. So it's something that I would imagine this committee could, with a straight face, ask for.
I mean, it's a recommendation. We can be in a position to try and push it. That and $5 might buy you a cup of coffee at Starbucks, but it might be a starting point for us.
Along the lines of what Mike said, and Lisa, maybe you know better as well from a legal perspective, but my only concern, again, I'm just the recreation rep here, but talking about this, my concern isn't the defined and implied boundaries kind of why we're in this position, and if we start to define them, does that have implications down the line, again, from a legal perspective?
I think that at some point, what would happen is that you have a survey done, and then if people on one side or the other dispute the survey, then that will be litigated. But at this point, it appears that there's no definitive survey that everyone will accept as an authority. And the idea that the towns can decide where the line is, that's just not true, unless you have an act of the general court. I mean, there's a defined line. It just has to be.
Well, and Lisa, I'll add, part of it is the surveys that Lori Gibbons has been working off of. And if you use Garmin or Navionics or one of those, it's a very different line than the line that's than the survey that Situate has shared with Cohasset, and is the basis for them identifying which moorings lie within Situate. And so there's there's notable differences between those two perspectives. And Navionics is, Garmin is not a legal source, but it's certainly one that's commonly understood. Susan, you have your hand up.
So can we clarify, are we trying to get the GPS accuracy of pieces of hardware Or are we trying to get the jurisdictional lines written down? Because I would
I
say
think
if
it's-
we're gonna, because, let me just continue. It seems like if we're gonna push for money being spent on a survey that involves some precise, ELF-based surveying, like proper surveying, that we might as well use that surveying for something that increases the resiliency to storm surge of the harbor. So I don't think that we should wade into the trying to redefine Plymouth and Norfolk County. But I think we might think about surveying, water levels and hydrology and stuff like that, that actually would make a difference in long-term sustainability of things that are being built and things that have been built on the harbor.
Okay. I will respond. My thought was, and yes, it is the line between Plymouth and Norfolk counties. And that's part of the discussion that somebody's hoping Norfolk County will pay for this. And, I think it could end up whoever's the aggrieved party is the one who, may be the one who wants to pay for it or needs to pay for it, but nobody's paying for it. And it is the jurisdictional one that, that we're hearing a lot of comments, we're seeing in the survey. I'm getting, email comments, not a ton, but when I'm walking around town, people say, what's going on with the moorings. So it is about, my reference point is jurisdictional, is the primary driver. Mike Sardina.
So this might be a naive question, but what is that line going to get us? I mean, it defines property, but it doesn't solve the problem that is being raised relative to one harbor master on one side, another harbor master on the other side, and the positions of moorings or the occupancy of moorings or the number of moorings. It doesn't solve any of those problems. So this is going to be part of the overall negotiation going forward, whether it's county to county or town to town or whatever. It's going to get worked out in the end. I don't think we need to go out and spend money on the survey when somebody's going to have to do it, and it'll be negotiated as to who pays for it.
Thank you, Mike. Lisa, you have the floor.
Yeah, I can, hopefully, this will be the, we can go on to. But the point of doing the survey is, I believe the harbor master believes it should be done. I believe that I would like to support her if she sees this as a need. If we don't define the area of who's what and where, the two towns are never going to get to yes. And it's going to be around the mooring, it's going to be around the oysters, it's going to be around jurisdiction of different bylaws going forward. So I think it's the one thing that we're not saying, I wouldn't say that we should send a vote over to the selectmen that says that, Cohasset should pay for this. We're just saying it has to be done, and let them figure out if it's the county or the town or the region or the, or out of a bond, out of a resiliency bond, out of the feds. But it should be done. That's all. That's what I would vote for.
Well, it was, I'm looking at the time. We have 18 minutes left. It was an experiment. It still is an experiment to see if we can come up with a position on stuff, but it's a challenge. Now I can also see the challenge the select board have with coming up with positions, no doubt. So it may have been a bit ambitious. I think what I could also say is, we could go, a sense of the committee is that we should have a survey, Lisa, I agree with your point. We're not saying how to pay for it. We're just trying to advocate in support of the harbor and Lori and the harbor master that a definitive jurisdictional survey of the harbor would greatly clarify both the work that Cohasset has to do, as well as inform the discussions between Scituate and Cohasset. I think we're saying that. Would it make sense to hold a vote? And we did. There's a motion on the floor that we advocate for a survey, and I think Lisa, you seconded it.
can you, would you mind just repeating the motion? I'm not sure I got it down.
I move that Harbor Committee advocates that there should be a jurisdictional survey of Cohasset Harbor in as soon as possible to inform maybe I'll just leave it at that. And Lisa, is that the motion that you seconded?
Yep. I'll resecond it.
All right. Well, let me put it to a vote of Harbor Committee members.
Wait, George, let me just get that. All right, so you move to advocate that a jurisdictional survey of Cohasset Harbor is done as soon as possible. Is that right?
That the Harbor Committee advocates that there be a survey a jurisdictional survey of Cohasset Harbor as soon as possible. Yes. This is an experiment in voting.
I don't- So I'm not sure that I have enough information to,
Well, then you can say no.
what?
I mean, you
can't-
could. Or
What is a jurisdictional survey? What does that mean? Who decides what the jurisdictional survey is? Isn't that the whole problem? Isn't that why the whole town is up in arms? Because nobody can decide actually which
Well-
jurisdictional survey is correct? Isn't
No,
that why everybody's arguing about it everywhere?
there is, but there
What do
are
we mean by it in our case? I want the definition to be really clear before me here, before I have to tell you whether I support your motion or not.
my assumption is there are third-party survey firms that are agreed and acknowledged by jurisdictions, including Situate and Cohasset, that could perform that survey. Just like Cavanaro works in Cohasset, and when he does a survey, we agree with it because he's an acknowledged registered land surveyor. And my expectation, if there is such a thing, is that there's
They're licensed.
or licensed surveyors who can do that in the water. So I'm not specifying who they are, but I'm assuming that those organizations exist. That's my thought, Susan.
Okay, and does anybody on this whole team know where the town is with all of this and all of our consultants are? I know there's litigation going on. I would assume that the litigation has involved a lot of jurisdictional surveys.
But
I'm not
So
in on
did-
what it is though.
all I did is there's a recent article in Cohasset Anchor. I sent it out just before the meeting because I looked at it earlier. And it's a posting by the Maura Curran, who is a select board member in Situate, explaining their view of the status of the litigation between Cohasset and Situate. That is the most current information I have. I did not attend the select board meeting yesterday, but I did not see harbor-related matters on the agenda for the select board meeting. Has anybody on this call attended the select board meeting yesterday for Cohasset? Okay, so the most current information I have is from March 13th in the Cohasset Anchor, and it just says it's outstanding, but there's no decisions. To that end, I'm going to hold a vote on this is a fairly, anyway, I'll just say I'm going to hold a vote. All in favor of the motion that we discussed signify by raising your hand. And so I'm counting me, Mike, George, and Lisa. Mike Sardina, Lisa, and George. All opposed? And Sean, I can't see you, so I might need you to weigh in on this. Sean, you're not visible and can't hear you. Do you have a point of view? Were you in favor or opposed? Might have lost him. We may come back to him. All opposed?
I'll be opposed because I just don't think it's worth poking the bear.
Okay. Any abstentions? Derek abstains. At the moment, we have, for what it's worth, 3 for, 1 against, 1 abstention, and 1 silent. And let's just record it that this is not a huge binding thing. I thought it was interesting discussion to see if we're on a Zoom in a meeting, can we establish positions? It's an interesting discussion. But I think I will close it now, and I appreciate you guys working with me on this. Thank you. In the next few minutes, we have 2 people who I've seen join. Mike Dick, thank you for being here. And John Reagan, thank you for being here. We also have as a topic of discussion, and I wanted to ask Montana. We're at 8:20. It's the James Brook Coastal Resilience 2024. We had a good discussion on it in our last meeting. Mike, thanks for bringing us up to speed in Montana. What I'd like to do is, Montana, if you could just give us a brief update of anything that's happened since we met 2.5 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. And then I'm going to have John Reagan, going to ask you to talk a little bit about your flooding at Margin Street. And then Mike Dick, Lisa mentioned that you may have some information from a capital budget perspective that informs this group. So we'll go in that order. Is that cool? Montana, can you provide an update on the James Brook and Coastal Resilience stuff that's going on with Woods Hole Group and others?
Sure. So right now, the Weston and Sampson Woods Hole Group project, we are waiting on Merrill to finish up the survey of the James Brook watershed area. We just finished our last boring survey last week, and we'll be getting that memo hopefully mid next week. We did decide, no official date yet, but we did decide there will be a walkthrough of our findings, like on the harbor sometime in probably mid-May. That will obviously be open to the public. It's just a rough idea as of right now, and then there will be a third and final public meeting in June to close the grant, but that is all I have as an update right now.
And could you remind me the borings that have been done? I think you've been pretty close to that. What is the point of the borings, and where are they being performed?
So there was 2, one on Border Street, like exactly halfway between Old Atlantica and like the Veterans Park. There was one done right in front of the Veterans Park, one further down on Summer Street, or 2 further down on Summer Street. But it's to test the bedrock to see like if in the future we did decide to build a seawall or raise these roadways, like what does the soil and sediment look like underneath the roadway? All very hypothetical. These are just precautions to put in the memo to say if in the next grant cycle we decide to do these things, we do have the evidence and the background studies to provide support for it. But those just got finished up last week, so we'll be getting the memo hopefully mid next week.
Good. Are you pleased with the progress of the consultants? Do you have a point of view on that?
Yeah, I mean, I would say so. We're just waiting on Merrill. We're a little bit behind, but nothing that's gonna be too impending on the final deadline. Otherwise, between now and probably May, I will have a much bigger update come our May meeting, because there's a lot to be done between now and May.
Great. Thank you for that, Montana. Are there questions, comments, or observations to Montana? Or anything to add since we met 2.5 weeks ago and talked about this? Awesome. Oh, go ahead, Lisa.
Oh, no, just thank you, Montana. And George, you want to stop sharing your screen?
Oh, gosh, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you for that. Montana, thank you for the update. Next on the agenda, John Reagan, we can see you if you want to come off mute. So welcome, John. John contacted me earlier today. John wanted to just, the question was, what's going on with, is anybody at the town looking at the flooding that happens occasionally on Margin Street due to storms and stuff? John, I'll let you explain that. We don't have a lot of time. What I wanted to do is have you just, I think I was interested, John, in your perspective, because we think about flooding on Margin Street and Stockbridge at King Tides. To me, we think about it a bit in the abstract and what does it do? Very interested in hearing from someone like yourself who lives there, who experiences this as someone who lives near the flooding, what you observe and what your concerns are and why you're asking, is that going to get solved or is there going to be a solution for that? That's my thought, John.
Sure.
I'm going to give you the floor, John. Welcome.
So I'm John Regan. Nice to meet everybody. I live on Stockbridge Street. Thank you for taking the time to hear from me this evening. Yeah, my issue is that the flooding on Margin Street, while it used to occur occasionally in the past, the last year to 18 months, maybe even more recent than that, maybe about the last 6 months, it's become exponentially worse. I work from home a lot, but occasionally I'm a lawyer. I have to go to court, and I can't even drive down the street. I can't get out of my neighborhood. My neighbors, I'm surprised you haven't heard from anyone, frankly, because my neighbors' yards get completely flooded with about a foot of water right up to their homes, up to their porches, the doors. This didn't used to happen a year ago. My house is set a little further back, so it's not an immediate, or exigent circumstance for me, but, it's starting to creep pretty close to the person who lives next to me. And frankly, I've been talking to my wife about potentially moving. It's gotten so bad. I'm just wondering if the town has any plans to do anything about this. I mean, it turns into like a lake. It's not an inch of water we're talking about. It's at least a foot that goes all the way into our neighborhood, up to people's homes. I'm a little bit surprised that nobody else has reached out to you guys or anyone else in town. And based on my, sort of lay perspective, when I'm trying to drive through it, or when it's not so bad and there's just some water coming in, I can tell that, and I'm not an engineer, but I can tell that there's water creeping through the middle of the wall or in sections where there should be, no water coming through. So I think that's part of the problem. And so maybe the integrity of the wall needs to be addressed or looked at, because I think there's simply just like holes in the wall and water from the harbor is coming through. But then on other occasions, when we do get, an inch or two of rain, and that's when and then we get a high tide, and that's when the really severe flooding that I've seen recently. And again, this is like 3 to 6 months. I've seen it happen 4 or 5 times now where water is coming right up to people's homes. So I think it's coming over the wall during those times. And so I guess there's 2 issues that, from, again, my truly unprofessional eye, that I think maybe someone should look at is A, are there holes in the wall that need to be repaired? And then B, does the wall need to be raised? I mean, this is right next to that giant condo construction. And I'm also a little surprised that they didn't address it before they built or invested all that money in that property to maybe protect the roadways, because I wouldn't buy a condo there if I couldn't drive through. So yeah, that's the issue. Those are some of the potential fixes I see, again, from my lay perspective, but it's becoming a very severe problem down here. And I think that, people's homes are going to be threatened quite soon.
And John, I apologize, we don't have a lot of time left to deliberate this.
Sure.
I do want to maybe ask just briefly, I'll throw in a couple things. We had a climate resilience forums 2 years ago, and we asked the safety, police and fire department to comment on what they would do if there's a severe flooding and somebody has a medical emergency or other kind of emergency, specifically in your area. And they said, well, one way or another, we'll get to the people. We'll either drive our fire trucks. They did not advocate buying a high water truck like Situate has. They have military surplus high water vehicles. And they said, one way or another, our fire department or medical professionals would get through to help people. It was not exactly, the solution of, an infrastructure solution that they proposed. I think you had a question. And
Well,
by the way, I'll just
yeah.
throw out another thing. We are having, the last discussion we had on climate resilience and the consultants we have that are trying to design problems. I would recommend that you attend those public hearings and state your concerns on this. Just
What
throwing
are
it-
those? What are those hearings?
Well, we'll send this out, but it's the coastal zone management hearings. Montana was just talking to it.
Okay.
There's going to be a public walkthrough, and the folks who are doing that stuff are really expert in and truly do understand the particularly this guy Nasser Brahim, who's with Woods Hole Group, is extremely familiar with the area of flooding you're talking about.
Yeah, and to be clear, I mean, I'm not talking about a safety, like
Yeah.
I don't think my house is gonna get swept away with me inside of it, but I mean, people's homes are gonna get flooded and,
Yeah.
this isn't Jerusalem Road, I don't think most of the people that live on this street are like, bazillionaires who can just go buy another house. I mean, I think most of their home equity is probably a large percentage of their net worth, and I mean, that's what I'm worried about. I mean, I spent a lot of money on this house. I'm fairly young. I have a young child, and if this house floods, no one's going to buy it. If I have to move, and people's home equity is going to get destroyed.
Thank you, John. Let me just open this up to the committee. Looking at, again, we're not deliberating on it, and we don't have an immediate solution. But John, I would tell you the Harbor Committee is a good place to start, like you're doing. So I appreciate you speaking. Montana, do you have any? I believe the way the grant cycle has worked with the consultants we have is they're really focused on protecting town infrastructure, the critical infrastructure like the wastewater treatment plant, and that's the current focus of their efforts around climate resilience and potentially infrastructure improvements. Is that accurate? And do you know of anything else that may be happening?
I would say that's accurate for this grant cycle in the past. I mean, I've grown up in Cohasset. I grew up on Stevens Lane, so I know what you're dealing with. I've watched it like my whole childhood, and I just moved out a year ago. Like I see Margin Court be flooded all the time, and other residents have come to us. I will say I'm on the lower of the totem pole. I do apply for these grants, but it has to all be approved by like town manager. Your concerns among other residents have definitely been vocalized to select board and town manager and assistant town manager. I know the seawall is definitely dilapidated and on its way. It's something that I can bring up to discuss in the next grant cycle of CZM, because like they really do focus on coastal resiliency, whether that's infrastructure or doing study designs. I'm not telling you it's a yes or a no, but I can revisit the idea with the people who would be willing to approve that project.
In my discussions, Brian Joyce, who's the town of Cohasset's chief engineer and head of the DPW, I understand they repointed the walls to try and improve them not long ago. And there's the other issue is there's tidal gates. So anything you hold back, you also have to let the water out. Mike Sardina, any comments that you have, Mike, or you don't have to, just throwing it out there.
No, Brian did have the seawall repointed a couple of years ago. There's also a fairly good sized opening in that wall that's between the town dock access point and the Oaks seawall. I mean, there's just an opening in the wall. So it's probably 3 feet wide or 5 feet wide. It's just a way for somebody to walk through the wall onto this salt marsh there. So that's another. So there's a gap there that would allow it. I think there's also, from what I understand, when the tide is high, sometimes the water comes up through the storm sewer system. So between engineering concerns, floodgates, whatever, tide gates, closing up the gap in the wall, raising the wall, perhaps revisiting whether the wall repointing has started to deteriorate already. basically was a parging material. It really wasn't something that would be really long lasting material, but I mean, that's my 2 cents worth on it.
Thank you, Mike. And I
I mean,
realize,
that is,
John,
that road is, that section of road at the base of Stockbridge is the lowest elevation of the roads around the harbor. It's at elevation 7. So that's the equivalent of a +12 tide would be on that road. And if you have storm surge and rain and everything else, you're definitely going to have flooding in there. So.
Yeah, there's always been a little flooding, but it has evolved into something very different recently. And I can send you guys some pictures.
No,
my
we've seen
my
it
neighbor's
all.
yard looks like it looks like you can't tell where the ocean starts and where it ends.
Yeah, no, I understand. I'm not trying to make excuses. I'm just saying this is what I know, which isn't necessarily the only thing that could be going on there. But I mean,
No,
if
that all makes sense.
if we have a lot of rain coming down and we have a high tide and we have let's call it fresh water uphill coming down to that elevation and seawater coming into the sewer system from below and rainwater coming from above, there's no place for the water to go. So that could be happening as well. The only way to solve this problem is to raise the road and raise the land behind it and raise the seawall. I mean, that's all going to be coming with resiliency studies going forward. There are vulnerable neighborhoods relative to sea level rise, and that area is one of them.
and I think, what often plays to this is how does Cohasset ensure the safety of residents and, for instance, the ability of the fire department and police department to access it in a case of emergency, in addition to you getting out, but that's the other side. Mike, Dick, did you have a comment on this topic? I thought I saw you.
Yes, Mike Sardina actually covered what I was going to say, but there's one interesting facet. That is that gap in the seawall. Mike, correct me if I'm wrong. I believe that's private property, and that the owners are not willing to do anything about the gap. And with a gap, there's nothing holding back the ocean. And John Regan, I also live near the harbor, and I can also tell you just from anecdotally, we've had 3 storms this winter that occurred on moon tides. And these were high wind events where most of Cape Cod Bay is pushed up towards our harbor from the southeast up towards us. And so I've seen tides that I'm estimating around 13.5 or 14 over the last 3 events, which I don't recall seeing, and we've lived down here for a long time. So you're absolutely right. The other thing I wanted to mention, George, and I know time has expired, I believe in our harbor study, the Margin Street problem is referenced along with a number of these items I've just talked about, like the gap in the seawall being private property. That's right. I think I got my info from. And so I will just suggest as an abutter to the harbor that perhaps the harbor committee could take as a work item going back to that study and say, these things we really need to pursue. Yes, they're in the study, but it's up to the harbor activists to push for it. Just as you feel it's important to push for a survey because there's so much misinformation without a survey.
Yeah.
My 2 cents.
Yeah,
Thank you for giving me.
Right, Mike.
Go ahead, Mike Sardino. I missed that.
I was going to say, Mike's right. Is basically, if I recall, the seawall along that section of Margin Street is actually outside the right-of-way line. And a good portion of that wall up to where the town dock is basically part of, you could say it's part of town property, even though it's outside the town right-of-way. But once you get past the town docks, that section of seawall that Mike's referring to is actually into private property. Somebody owns that little piece of marsh grass there on the harbor side of the wall. That's private property, that marsh grass area plus the wall. So That gap is not anything the town has control over.
Oh, they can
But-
take it by eminent domain and build a wall because it's gonna be
Yeah.
it's gonna be unlivable over here.
It's
I mean,
true.
it doesn't mean that we can't explore things, but you know, maybe there's a new owner of that, who knows? But I agree with you, Mike, and both Mikes. This is something, it's not lost to us, John. It's just you know, in the current, I guess, prioritization, the current survey money, which is low dollars, is going toward looking at the highest priority item, which is protecting vulnerable town infrastructure.
No, I
Um,
understand. But you know, as I think it was Mike mentioned, and I tried to say right off the top, I mean, this is happening really fast. This wasn't a problem a year and a half ago, 2 years ago. There would be some flooding, but it really wasn't a big deal.
Yeah.
It's hard to explain how bad it is now.
Well, I think you and Mike Dick are both concurring that the frequency of this that you've observed on one side of the harbor and Mike on the other is empirically, you're saying it's happening a lot more.
Yeah.
So, John, I'm going to close down now because we're a little bit over, but thank you so much for
Tom,
attending.
thanks for having me.
Welcome to stay. We have just one more topic. Mike Dick, thank you, John. Mike, Lisa said that the question we had from Harbor Committee, and I've asked Brian Host of Capital Budget, now asking you, do you know if has money been penciled into the capital budget for purposes of voting at town meeting in June? There would be some money allocated toward the new proposed dock extension at Parker Avenue. Money like to the tune of $25,000 or $40,000 to at least begin engineering studies of that. Do you know?
George, I saw one document 2 weeks ago, and I should go back and reference it, that had money for, I believe, the government wharf project. And I'm going by memory, maybe 60, 70,000 having to do perhaps with design. Nothing about town docks that I can recall, but I will, I will take a look. Capital, and I came on the call tonight just to introduce myself as the liaison from Capital Budget. Our committee sends liaisons to the various groups that might have capital projects to ask questions that would have come up later, but we try and front run and get answers to questions so that when you do come before Capital Budget with a capital request, we've got a lot of good information already. And, you know, our role is to help advocate for you if you've got a project that needs doing. And we try and figure out how best to accomplish that within the town manager's budget. So that's why I joined tonight, and I will continue to join when I can.
And so, to that end, my question: this capital request was from Lori Gibbons, town employee, through to Michelle Leary and Chris Senior, and in a discussion in January that I was part of, I heard them say they were going to put money in the capital budget to support the new dock extension that Lori was advocating. And I'm just trying to get some validation that money might be penciled in. However, Brian said he was going to look, and Michelle.
Okay.
So I haven't heard anything definitive. Would love it if you're in a, if we hear no, that's fine to hear. If we hear yes, that's even better. But we're just trying to find out one way or another whether that's in there, whether there's
So
any.
I will make a point of calling Michelle Leary tomorrow
All right,
and getting an update. And if you like, I'll report back to you, George.
that would be great. Thanks, Mike.
Okay,
And
my pleasure.
thank you for agreeing to be liaison to our committee.
Sure.
With that, thank you for that. Are there any other topics to bring before tonight's meeting? Susan?
I just want to invite everybody on the Harbor Committee and all of your constituents to CSCR's annual State of the Harbor event, which will be Thursday, March 28th at Wilcott Commons at 7 o'clock to 8:30. slightly different format than last year, but the students will be, instead of a lot of presentations by students, we'll have students at their posters, so you can go visit them and ask them about their research. It's also a great time for town members and Harbor Committee members to talk to us about wishes for our 2024 research. Like if you want us to go do drifter research on the currents that are going by the outtake bubbler, that's a good time to bring that kind of stuff up. Or if you wanted to survey depths or whatever. I mean, we at CSCR, we like to do actual real world research, and the state of the harbor is when we present it to the town. So all are invited to that. And then I also had one other thought, just when we were discussing the gap in the seawall. And that obviously is one particular issue, but I'm wondering if maybe we could hear from somebody who knows how it works, how we might have a more consistent approach. Because obviously if there's one hole in the seawall anywhere because it's on private property, and it doesn't matter was that particular property or anywhere else, but it's always going to cause the same problem. So I wonder if we could hear from people who have dealt with eminent domain and seawalls, because you have to have a regional approach to storm surge, otherwise it pokes through, goes under, goes around. But I wonder if there's good ways that we might think about going about it, looking toward the future, and especially if some of those properties are in transition and being sold to new owners. I wonder if there's a time where we might get some sort of, I don't know, climate resiliency easement or something. And I don't know what those answers are, but maybe there's people in CCM that have some expertise. Or
let me throw out that specifically, Nasser Brahim of the Woods Hole Institute in the public meetings is extremely aware of this kind of thing. It not just generally, but specifically in Cohasset, where they've done the surveys, both from the earlier surveys as well as the ones they're pursuing now. I think that would be a great forum to ask those questions, because not to say that he's got all the answers, but it's a good starting point to potentially inform our committee.
Yeah, and I'd be most interested in learning about solutions, not just identifying the problems, because the solutions is the hard part.
I'm still suggesting that.
And the solutions is where you have to be innovative if you want it to happen.
I'm still advocating that that's a good starting point, because that's what Woods Hole Institute is focused on, is solutions at this point. Other topics. Thank you, Susan. Other topics. Thank you. Lisa, it looks like you're thinking.
I'm just thinking about what can of worms to open at this point at 8:45.
Well, we could also pose it for another
Which
time.
one will I think, I just wonder if it would make sense to have everyone direct to the chair by separate emails, because we can't deliberate under the open meeting law by email. But maybe perhaps send a note to George so he can kind of get a sense about what types of, from that laundry list of issues that were presented, what issues may be of interest to individual committee members to take positions on. And that way we could winnow them down to a smaller list that would be realistic and be productive.
I appreciate that practical suggestion, Lisa. To that end, I will resend that email with that suggestion to the committee, and see what happens from there.
And that way, if we're going to do that, perhaps we could, make sure that we have a bigger group of people to vote. If we're going to be taking a vote, we want people who are members are going to want to be present when a vote is taken, and so we can give people notice that votes are going to be taken.
Yeah. I mean, yes, thank you. I appreciate that. Derek, anything on your mind?
I'm good. Thank you for asking.
Then may I hear okay, Susan, go ahead.
Just want to make sure we have the next meetings correct, because I have a lot of harbor committees written in small writing on my calendar, and I found that a lot of them are wrong.
Well,
So
at this point, we're back on schedule. So our
Feb-
next scheduled meeting is 2 months from now on the third Wednesday of May, it's listed in the agenda. And I think that is May 15th.
Okay.
It is May 15th,
Thank you.
which is on schedule.
Okay, and then let me just make sure I got Lisa's thing down properly. You would like each of us to email George which of the items in the bulleted list we have an interest in discussing or forming a position on? Is that correct, Lisa?
That is
Okay.
correct. And George will send an email follow-up with that request. Thank you, Susan. Thank you for taking notes. We can all appreciate Susan keeping notes here. Thank you. Can I hear a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second?
Second.
All in favor, raise your hand.
Hi.
Thank you all for attending, and we'll be doing this via Zoom on May 15th as well at this point.
Bye-bye.
Have a
Great
good
night.
night.
Oh,
Bye.
right.
Thanks,
Bye.
everybody.